Welcome into the second edition of Connor's Takes. We recorded our first episode about a week and a half ago, which makes sense to record a second one right as we start the new week, heading into Super Bowl week. But there was a lot of things that happened before that we got to get into, and some off-season takes will be included before Super Bowl takes happen next week, which would also be more firing entertainment. All right. Senior Bowl was on Saturday. Draft stocks for some of the receivers were good. Some of them dropped. A lot of if you would look at it this way, people are forgetting that there's the Super Bowl and they're jumping right into mock draft season. All over Twitter, like who cares about the Super Bowl? Let's go right into mock draft season super early this year. So you're going to see that all over your Twitter timeline for the next 3 months. Let's get into it. Bills pick late in the draft because they made the playoffs. They made it to the divisional round. They lose in the divisional round, so they're in that 27-ish, the 28th overall pick in this year's draft. So that means no Roman Dunze, no Malik Neighbors, no Marvin Harrison Jr., Troy Franklin, maybe Tess Walker. Where do you feel that where the Bills could go? Do you feel the Bills will make a franchise altering trade in the draft?
Well, plenty of ideas to go around that even I've seen, flying around Twitter because yeah, you're right, Paul. It's mock draft season. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's starting their trades too. But what I kind of was thinking is if there is a possibility, I think, for the Buffalo Bills to trade into the top 10, I think that maybe if they do it, it would be a little later in the top 10. I don't see them paying a huge package to get into the top 5. I just don't think it's Brandon Beane's style to trade anyway, but it seems like this would be the offseason to do it because the team is literally right there. Like they are right there and they just got to get some replacements for Gabe Davis. They've got to supplement the line, the wide receiver room behind Khalil Shakir. And, there's a possibility they don't keep Trent Sherfield. We're going to have a pretty depleted wide receiver room. So I feel like if you're going to trade up with as strong as a wide receiver class is this year, this would be a great time to do it. I don't think that getting into the top 5 is going to be necessarily an option. You're going to have to pay too much for that. But, I'm thinking if you can draft into the top 10, say maybe, like, take the Titans pick at 7 or the Falcons pick at 8, because I don't think the Bears would get rid of the second pick at 9, and I certainly don't think the Jets would be stupid enough to trade 10 to us. I mean, hey, if Joe Douglas wants to be that dumb, he can go right ahead. I'll gladly take it, but I think our best shot would be 7 or 8 with either the Titans or Falcons, maybe 8 with the Falcons. And at that point, I think if you make that logistical assumption to trade up, this has to be a wide receiver. And
Mhm.
a
Absolutely.
few mock drafts I've seen have Malik Neighbors going as high as 6 to the Giants. I saw one where he was the second receiver off the board at 5 to the Chargers. I think if depending on how the board falls out, that would allow Romeo Odunze to fall right into our laps if we traded up that high. And just imagining the Bills with Stephon Diggs, Khalil Shakir, and Romeo Odunze, and then say maybe if you have to give up your second round pick this year to the Falcons to get up that high, you don't realistically have the second round pick, but you still have the third round pick. Roman Wilson is projected as a third rounder. Last I've been hearing, you take Roman Wilson right there, and you have loaded this receiver room now, because then you'd have everybody I've mentioned, and then Roman Wilson. Oh my God, the receiver room would get me fired up enough to put myself in a time capsule and just go all the way to September at that point because that would be incredible. Now, I think trading up, yeah, we got to if you're trading up, you have to go wide receiver. Like, there's no way that you don't take a wide receiver, but I feel like there are maybe like 1 or 2 exceptions to the rule that I'd make personally. I know a lot of us are like, "No, you gotta take wide receiver round 1. You gotta take wide receiver round 1." And I'm in agreement for sure, but I still feel like there are just a couple of situations where I think if you traded up that high and you didn't get a wide receiver, I feel like there's a few exceptions. Jared Verse is one of the exceptions. I've watched enough Jared Verse highlights and enough Jared Verse tape as a Knowles fan to know just how much of a game changer he can be at the position. And having Jared Verse on the same line as Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau, oh my God, you wouldn't be able to stop that. Like you'd have to protect from Oliver and Rousseau, and Verse is just going to use his athleticism to bust down the doors and come right at the quarterback. That would be such a steal, and that's one of the only exceptions to the rule that I could see, and there's a few others that would be, like, interesting names, but no, it's either wide receiver or Jared Verse, maybe, Dallas Turner, but no, no way. I think most mocks have him going around 8 to 10 to either the Falcons or the Jets, but I can't justify anybody but a wide receiver there. Sure, Jared Verse would be nice, but it has to be a wide receiver. Romeo Dunze, oh my god. Malik Neighbors, oh, could you just imagine? Imagine both of them. Just take your pick, Paul. Any one of them on this Bills team, Diggs would have to Diggs wouldn't have to worry so much about targets because everybody's going to be too scared of covering the rookies. This draft
Oh
to
yeah.
me, wide receiver seems a lot has the same kind of feel that the Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle type saga has, where you get one of those elite guys, you're going to be set for life at the receiver position. And we're set for a few
Absolutely.
years at wide receiver one with Stephon Diggs, but man, wouldn't it be nice to have our own version of Jamar Chase or even well, really, Jamar Chase. I mean, yeah, he had a kind of a down year last year. Jalen Waddle did too, but wouldn't it be nice to have just our version of one of those two? I mean, I know Khalil Shakir is coming into his own. He had a 66% catch rate, I think, this season, which in his
Yes,
limited
he
time,
had one of the best. I
it
mean,
was
as he
yeah, it was the best catch rate out of every wide receiver. Minimum, I think it was like 100 receptions or something like that, and
something
that
like that.
was on a very limited snap count because, he was toward the bottom of the chart, and then he came up as Gabe Davis kinda started to fall off, and, oh my god, I could just only imagine how good it would be to have Shakir have that double coverage on Shakir, and then, oh, yeah, you thought Shakir was gonna get the target, psych, and it's someone like Romeo Odunze, and he just bolts down the field. Oh, the possibilities are endless, especially if we can trade up, but to me, it seems like Brandon Beane isn't really the kind of guy that would trade up, but if there's ever a year to trade up for an elite talent, it has to be this year. Like, you are right there, as I said a second ago, right there. We beat ourselves against the Chiefs. All we really need is just a few more weapons on the receiving core to kinda take the attention off Stephon Diggs and get the attention spread elsewhere, and then that opens up the run game too for James Cook. So, just imagine the possibilities of an elite receiver, like, making me salivate thinking about it. If you're gonna trade up this year, trade up for sure.
Reminds me of just right as you were talking about trading up for a receiver and like what would be, Bean's range. I would think that would be the range because reminds me of the Julio Jones trade when the
Ooh,
Atlanta Falcons decided they were going from 27 to 6, and they traded with the Browns because AJ Brown was already sorry, AJ Green was already selected by the Bengals, and I don't remember the Atlanta Falcons team that year and what they really needed, but,
What?
they decided to make that trade, and, it took the
Wait,
years
which
took
year?
the first round.
What year was that, Paul? I'm trying to
I got
think.
it, 2011. It was
Oh,
in the 2011 draft.
wow. Yeah, that is. Yeah, I think that was still. I think that was still before Matt Ryan, but
I
they
believe
still
so.
need. I believe that was when they still had Michael Vick. I could be really wrong, but I think that was before Matt
No,
Ryan.
they had Matt Ryan, uh, and then they had, Rowdy Wright.
Ah, you know what? Right. So yeah, they did need a receiver in that draft, and look at what they did. They got Julio
Yeah,
freaking Jones, and Julio Jones was one of the best receivers in the league all them years. I think maybe it's our turn to do that. It's our turn to do that. Take a 28, take the 28th pick, jump up to like 8th, ninth, maybe even 7th. Get us that elite receiver. Have our own Julio Jones in his prime. That is, man, the possibilities are endless. Just get me
it really
Malik
is.
Neighbors, Romeo Dunze. Oh my God, endless possibilities.
With 113 going now to free agency, there's another 13 that's standing out there in the realms of free agency right now. Even though his market value by Sport Track is $23.8 million, Bills can open up that exact amount to maybe get this other number 13 that's standing out there who played with Baker in Tampa, Mike Evans.
Oh
Do you?
man,
I mean, Mike Evans. Even though he's 30, he's still pretty. He's in the same age group as Stephon Diggs. Does Mike Evans have a shot to be a Bill in 2024?
Mike Evans. Oh
Yeah,
man. Oh, it would be interesting to see how we approach free agency, especially with the glaring need at receiver. But I just feel like our cap space is so bad and the situation is so bad that if we wanted a guy like Mike Evans, we're going to lose a lot of people in the process because we got our own guys to pay as well. And at the end of the day, yeah, we need a receiver, but we also need to be getting younger as a team. Source, look at this year's Green Bay Packers. That was the youngest team in the league this season, and they made it to the divisional round of the playoffs. They're getting younger, and that team is going to be around for a while. At receiver, we specifically need to start getting younger because at that point, we need to start building a better core around Josh Allen. Sure, I mean, Stephon will still be here a few more years. I'm willing to bet. But even despite that, I think we need to start looking at Stephon's replacement, just in case something happens, he does decide to leave or whatever. I just don't see Mike Evans coming here as a good alternative to that, despite the fact that he's had what over how many consecutive 1,000-yard seasons? It's like a really high amount, like 13 or something like that, I think.
Mike
But
Evans.
there's a lot
Something
of
like
free
that.
agent wide receivers I think we could have just kind of uh as supplemental players, just to kind of fill out the depth because the Bills need to get better at depth as well. We saw how defensive depth kind of killed us against the Chiefs. I think actually having some good receiver depth would be nice as well. And there's a lot of really interesting receivers that are out there, believe it or not. Um, Interesting names. Braxton Berrios is out there. If you use him like the Dolphins did, you can actually have him do most kickoff and punt returns, and he is electric on kickoff and punt returns. You could sign Berrios to kind of a low market value deal. I don't remember exactly what it is, his value, but it would be an interesting idea to kind of have Braxton Berrios as a Bill. That way he can basically handle all kickoff and punt returns and then still be a good guy, just as another option for Josh Allen if he needs one. Another interesting option that I'm seeing on the long list is Kendrick Bourne.
Oh yeah, he's a target of mine.
Yeah, Kendrick Bourne, Cedric Wilson. I know the Dolphins kind of used him toward the latter half of the season, but he's got very good ability with contested catches. I mean, he is a freak, like jumping up
Oh
there
yeah.
for some of those balls, grabbing, really tough catches. And Allen's accurate enough to be able to thread the needle enough where Cedric Wilson could catch a couple of those really hard, fast balls. I don't think we're keeping Trent Sherfield, unfortunately, but T. Higgins was another name I thought about, being a Bill. I just don't see it. I think he's more likely going to either stay with Cincinnati or worst case go to the friggin' Jets. Oh my god.
The Jets have their own cap issues. I don't think they would necessarily. I mean, they want to be aggressive for Aaron Rodgers. I get
Mhm.
that, but the money I don't think fits. Don't think he's if he stays in Cincy, that means Tyler Boyd is 100% signing elsewhere. So that's
For
the
sure.
thing. I think he probably stays. Tyler Boyd, they say you can go to the road. Let me give you a maybe a potential scenario of looking into the future for the Bills free agency slash draft slash trading type off season. They signed
Oh boy.
Kendrick Bourne with a
What?
4.8 market value, very cheap and affordable. Instead of trading in the draft, they trade for Keenan Allen.
What?
They take him from the Chargers, and then we draft either somebody at 28, maybe it's Troy Franklin or Brian Thompson Jr. who are still there. Maybe Xavier Leggett falls in
Oh, that'd be
at 28,
nice.
but you're there trading, having a possibility of taking one of those, they're not going to be superstar talents like Romanuze Neighbors or anyone else, but you still got a receiver that you could still build around then Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs, and then you got Kendrick Bourne.
Wait a
Or you
second.
can
Hang
take
on.
route 2. You sign Bourne, and then you sign Marquise Brown, and then you take a receiver in the draft.
Hmm.
Your
Interesting.
thoughts?
Marquise Brown as a Bill would just be very interesting considering, that's Antonio Brown's relative. And remember the time
Wait,
Antonio
back up,
Brown.
what?
Yeah, no. Marquise Brown is related to Antonio Brown. They're cousins. Do you not know that,
How
Paul?
how did I not know that?
That's a good question. How
Interesting.
did you not know that? Yeah, they're related. And every time
Huh,
if I think of Marquise Brown being a Bill, it reminds me of the time when the Steelers tried to trade Antonio Brown to the Bills and had a pick lined up ready to go. The trade was ready, and Antonio Brown said, "No, I'm not playing in Buffalo," and canceled the trade. Like
yeah.
that was something else. Marquise Brown, though, that's actually a fairly intriguing idea because we saw in Arizona where he had a lot of those opportunities to get free, make some space on his own. That was some incredible stuff.
Yeah.
But to one end though, you made the comments about trading for Keenan Allen and then signing Kendrick Bourne. Where does that leave us with Khalil Shakir though? I want Khalil Shakir to have a
Right.
prominent role in the offense. I don't really want to have him shoved back down the depth chart just because
Oh,
we
I agree.
signed, if we signed Kendrick Bourne, he'd have to be lower on the chart than Khalil Shakir, like straight up. There's just a few other players I feel like we could target more aggressively, just depending on cap, of course, because we got a lot of cap gymnastics to work through. I think step one to that would obviously be to restructure Josh Allen's contract to immediately cut the cap deficit in half, but there's still a whole lot more to do than just restructure Josh Allen. Like we got a lot to do there. So,
Yeah, the yeah, I don't think he would be kicked down the depth chart for for Shakir. I think Shakir, you know, he prove that he could he prove that this during the season that he could be the Bills' number 3 option? Yes. I mean, but did that secure him a spot? No. Maybe adding a Bourne, you have receiver 1, and then you have receiver 2, then you have wide receiver 1A 3A, and then you have wide receiver 3B, and then, you have wide receiver 4 as your rookie in that kind of,
hmm.
he will have an important role to your team because that's Joe Brady's job to do that. But I think having him as a wide receiver 4 won't hurt because you have so many other people for him to learn from.
Yeah, interesting thought nonetheless. I just feel like there's such a wide range of receiving options that we've got pretty much once we figure out the cap situation, there's a lot of paths to take. Do we need depth though? Like we got to get depth, and that's just out of the question. Like depth everywhere. The depth this season really showed out, but we still got to improve at that end. You just got to always prepare for the worst, especially with a team as
Abs-
good as a team bullied up by Josh Allen.
Absolutely. All right. Now, off from a Bill standpoint, let's take a look at and unfold this in an AFC East type of outlook and like what could free agency. The Bills have their cap issues, but the Bills are not the only team with cap issues. You got the Miami Dolphins with a couple of others, and then you got the Aaron Rodgers saga in New York and trying to build a Super Bowl ish type team in New York, and then you got the New England Patriots that basically says we're tearing it all down and we're going to start from scratch, even though they have the most cap space around in the AFC East, where they could potentially, buy in and say, "This we're gonna regroup with one talent, but also we're just gonna buy in and become playoff contenders after a year after a year off."
Let's not discuss the
Interesting.
idea of that
No,
because
yeah, we don't have to discuss that. No.
no, gross. Hate the Patriots. Let's not discuss that.
Yeah, the Patriots are not in the cat talking points. It's the Jets. Primarily, just stick with the Jets and the Dolphins here,
hmm
because those are the two, enemies, or the two teams that are focusing on taking down the Bills' throne in the AFC East.
Good luck with
Do
that.
you How aggressive do you think the Dolphins or even general manager Aaron Rodgers will be in the
General
offseason?
Aaron Rodgers. That sounds about right. It really does. I think the Jets are actually going to be a lot more aggressive than the Dolphins. And partially that reason is because they have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And you've got to think he's got maybe two at worst, maybe years left, maybe three if you want to really stretch it. But at that point, Father Time takes his toll on everybody. It took his toll on Tom Brady. Um, took his toll on Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees. I mean, Father Time will get him in the end.
Oh,
And how many years do they? I feel like the Jets have a Super Bowl window that is open as long as Aaron Rodgers is a healthy quarterback. And unless he regresses a lot, I feel like the Jets are going to be very, very aggressive in free agency and in the draft. I feel like I'm not gonna sit here and be like, "Oh, we need to freak out about the Jets or we need to freak out about the Dolphins," especially not the Dolphins. Take a look at our record against the Dolphins, and that's a reason to never freak out about the Dolphins. They might get a lucky win. They got two lucky wins against us. One of them was because Allen's receiver dropped a wide open pass in the end zone a couple of years ago, and then the Sun game, which that was quite that was literally the power of the state of Florida why that game happened the way it did. So I'm not too worried about the Dolphins from that standpoint. The Jets, I feel like they're going to try to get aggressive for Devontae Adams, which begs the question, do they actually trade away a good fortune, maybe even lose that first round pick of theirs at 10 to get Devontae Adams, which would then cause them to, at that point, lose out on an offensive lineman at 10? That's an interesting idea in theory, because imagine this or next year they have Devontae Adams, they have Garrett Wilson, they have all those talents at receiver, and they have Brees Hall in the backfield. Yet the offensive line doesn't really get much better. It's going to be another rocky year for the Jets. I don't think we're going to be in that tight of a situation. As for the Dolphins, they're going to pay, so they're going to lose some people. I've gone on air many a times and said how I think it'd be interesting in our own, get our own cap situation together and have Christian Wilkins and Andrew Van Ginkel, one of the two, or maybe even both of them, depending on how well Brandon Bean can manage the cap as a bill. The the poeticism of the entire deal would just be immense. Just imagine being in Hard Rock, Bills Mafia cheering as the defense is on the field, Christian Wilkins or Andrew Van Ginkel sack Tua. Oh man, and the Bills Mafia just goes absolutely ballistic in Hard Rock. Oh man, that would hire me, NFL script writers. I could do this. I could do this script. Let me write it. But
Yeah.
for sure, I'm definitely thinking that the Dolphins are going to lose people down the line. And I feel like if the Jets get too aggressive, they're going to neglect a very, very key position. If they get aggressive with drafting skill players or signing skill players in free agency, I think they might lose out in another area. It just seems to me like they're going to do something that's going to hurt them in another area.
Mhm.
So I'm not too concerned about either team, but they have to definitely, you got to look at them. You got to watch what they do in the offseason to kind of plan about how we're going to approach our own draft, our own free agency. Let me just be completely honest, though. That Teron Johnson pick six on Aaron Rodgers is going to hit like crack next season. I am manifesting a Teron Johnson pick six on Aaron Rodgers. That'd just be so beautiful.
It would be nice. What also would be nice is a Teron Johnson maybe pick six on Tua to lead us into our final topic
Yes.
of the night, maybe the most fiery topic of the night.
Ooh, yeah.
And if you are watching this, the technical issues with Connor's feed might just be just the Florida weather, so we apologize for that if it does, uh, just apology. But DC issues in Miami,
Oh
you
man.
know,
I just I
they
know I
go
said
3
it on the
years.
last episode. I know I said it on the last episode, but man, you're gonna lose another defensive coordinator that quick. And Vic Fangio didn't even do that bad of a job. His defense was finally starting to meld. They were looking really solid against the Chiefs in negative 30-degree weather, and it was the offense that couldn't seal the deal. Like, now all these players have to learn another scheme. Imagine being a guy like Christian Wilkins or Jalen Phillips. You've been there, or even Xavier Howard. You've been there a while, and now you're going through a third defensive coordinator in Anthony Weaver. I hate it. They made the right decision, unfortunately. I was really hoping they were going to take Brandon Staley. That would have been
Same.
hilarious. I know Jalen Ramsey was on uh he was on the subject of how great it would be if they took Staley. I'm just really
Mhm.
glad they did. I wish they would have, but I know Ramsey's probably like, "Oh, well, I'm glad they didn't because Anthony Weaver seems like he's going to be a pretty solid pick." But again, they have to learn another defensive scheme. How long before that defensive scheme melds? So it's like, and then how what is it with all the players coming out about Vic Fangio and saying some very interesting things? Like, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but the part where Javon Holland posted on his Instagram story of him literally kicking rocks after Vic Fangio was released from the Dolphins is interesting.
Hmm.
Very telling. Makes you wonder just how they really felt about Fangio, and it honestly kinda makes you wonder if they're not just a bunch of soft players down there. Like, they're good players, plenty of them. Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. There's a lot of great players down there, but sometimes you just gotta wonder, are they just soft? Because yet again, that's another, older disciplinarian kinda guy, tries to get some order in on the defense, and he's gone, and now everybody's happy again? Like, at what point do you start to question the culture down there, especially on the defensive side of the ball, now that you're going through a 3rd defensive coordinator? Like, I don't know. It just seems to me like there's a lot of questions that need answering everywhere
Hey, let
because
me pose this question to you, kind of like on that topic
okay,
of maybe
pose it.
soft players. Soft players, the maybe the light connection, third year, this is your third new, they went through three new coordinators in 3 years. Now here's the fourth. Do you think this could possibly be the last year for some of these players, like Christian Wilkins, Xavier Howard, maybe Javon Holland? They're like, okay, three systems in 3 years, because you see with teams and with offensive, coordinators, they keep switching them. The players are like, got enough of this. I want somewhere that's stable. Does unstableness lead to maybe this is the end of this era of Dolphins defense?
Hmm. That actually is interesting. Do you remember a guy named Minka Fitzpatrick?
I do.
Look at what happened to him in Miami.
I
They
see.
drafted him. He
Uh-huh.
played, a couple of games, and then Miami did not keep him locked in at his
Mhm.
position. They kinda jerked him around the
Right.
field, one position to another position to another position in a scheme after scheme after scheme, and he just straight up said, "I want out," and he got out to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh anchored him at his position of choice, and look at him now. He is a top safety in the league. So, at some point, scheming is an issue for players. Like going and having to learn new scheme after new scheme is going to get old. I mean, I don't know if Christian Wilkins is most likely going to be a Dolphin next season. I definitely think he's leaving. I think word around, the word that I can still hear from the Dolphins fans or from Dolphins reporters is that he's probably gone because they've got so many players they need to play or pay. And I just don't know how you can manage to keep that defense intact. I definitely think they're going to lose Christian Wilkins. They might lose Andrew Van Ginkel. I'm pretty sure he is a free agent as well. Javon Holland, you're going to have to pay him at some point. I mean, they're in a mess. And at this point now, it's a matter of do you want to keep staying on a team where it's just going to keep jerking you around from scheme to scheme? I mean, at what point do you put your foot down and be like, okay, yeah, I like playing in Miami because I get to live in Miami, Florida, but at what point do we actually start winning? Because they haven't done that at all. I feel like as a team, they're getting they're improving every year, which is why we need to definitely be cautious of the Dolphins. But I feel like they're starting to hit their ceiling, if you know what I mean. They barely improved this season with a fully healthy Tua, but they did improve. And if they keep making those small steps, it's definitely going to be a little concerning? So at the end of the
A
day, they're
winning
not
team
going to
with
be
a
the same
low
team.
mentality.
Mhm.
They're a winning team with a low mentality,
Mhm.
Look, if you think of this way, I mean, I live in Buffalo sports, and this why this makes me think. There's the Sabres, right? The Sabres, had all this great talent. I'm not going to list it all because if you're a Sabres fan or in the name of hockey, you know who I'm talking about. But for example, they had Eichel, they had Reinhardt, they had all these great talented players. They hit their peak. Nothing happened. They kept changing coaches, kept changing GMs, and they just, at one point, they just gave up. They said no. I feel that could happen with the transition of another defensive coordinator. They also got some expiring contracts they need to take care of on offense, and that might just leave out the defense. And once Christian Wilkins go, you could say he's primarily a leader on that defense. You might see Gink go, and that might turn into a long spiraling of a transformation on D.
Hey, I just want one of them to be a Bill for the poeticism alone. Get Christian Wilkins or Andrew Van Ginkel as a Bill, sacking Tua and Hard Rock. I know I've said it enough, but just the possibilities, despite, the cap being in the situation that it is, man, it's just something to think about and something I love thinking about. Could you just
Mhm.
imagine? I just want to imagine that for a while. Imagine how nuts that stadium's gonna be when Tua gets sacked by his own guy, or his former guy. They publicized him so much on Hard Knocks, you know, Salt and Pepper, that duo probably isn't gonna exist next season. And Pepper becomes a Bill, goes against, well, he won't be actively going against Zach Seiler, but oh man, that's just it's just funny to think about. Just you might have to put that in like a Madden sim because of the unlikeliness that it will actually happen, but still, it's just fun to think about. At some point or other, the Dolphins are going to have to get consistent as a team, and they're going to have to build a team that can sustain. They haven't been able to do that. I don't think they're going to be able to do that, and thankfully we have. So
Right.
just need to stay consistent, keep the winning culture going.
Do that. Everything should find itself some peace in mind, and hopefully, you know at the end of the 2024 season, Bills fans are not saying, well, there's always next year.
Yeah, I
All
I don't
right.
want to be saying that next season
Yeah,
for sure.
no, no, I want to say there's always next after the Super Bowl happens, we win it. I want to say there's always next year to repeat. There we go.
Yes.
You just
That's the kind of next year that we need to be hearing next season.
Yes,
There's next year to repeat as champions.
exactly. But as that will be the final words that we will say on this show, because we have reached the end of the second episode of Connor's Takes. If you enjoyed this, think about subscribing, maybe commenting on things that you want us to talk about, because there's a full off season of this. We're eventually just going to start running out of topics, and we're just going to start making things up. Maybe that would be the fun and the artist of this show, just making random topics because we need to, just for content, maybe favorite ice cream topics. I don't know.
Oh my
There's
god.
Are
Yeah,
you a
you want my
Rocky
hot
Road
take on
fan or are
ice
you
cream
a cotton candy
flavors.
guy?
Yeah, you want my hot take on ice cream flavors at this rate. Oh my god.
But also tune into the Undercovers podcast weekly at on Mondays 7 o'clock. On Mondays, Super Bowl week is coming up. I mean, there's a full week of Super Bowl, and then there's that Super Bowl hangover where you finally realize football is over with, and will have to go 6 months of foot of no football after doing 6 hours of commercial free football.
Huh.
All right. You see, everything works when it comes to the brain, just matches up. Um, that's it. No final thoughts. But that'll end the show. In every way we end this show, we say, "Go Bills."
Go Bills.